Hi, thanks for attending our webinar on getting your mainframe compliant in hours. Compliance and security have been attracting a lot of attention these days, and rightly so. We're going to talk about the various standards that organizations need to comply with and talk about how our product, FIM Plus, can help you achieve compliance, provide better security, all with a relatively low amount of effort. To level set everyone, we're going to start with a very short overview of how FIM works. We'll talk a bit about PCI and then move on to the audit reporting capability included with FIM Plus. We're going to do a small poll after that, and then we're going to follow that with discussions on the NIST framework, FIM, and HIPAA. We're then going to show you how FIM Plus can help in a bit more detail, and we'll follow that up with a discussion on GDPR and banking resiliency. Finally, we'll wrap up and answer any questions you have asked. Questions may be asked at any time using the question menu item located on the left-hand side of your screen. First of all, we want to level set you with the basics of how FIM technology and our product FIM Plus works on the mainframe. This is an overview of how FIM Plus ensures that files haven't changed. FIM Plus is a client-server application. The trust server runs on an LPAR, and the agents can run on the same or on other LPARs. The communication between the trust server and the agents is via an encrypted TCP/IP session, so the agent can be on the same or on different hardware. The keys are created by the agent and then sent to the FIM Plus server. The keys are two-part and contain a hash from the contents of the file and a hash code from the metadata of the file. The keys from the initial scan are stored in the vault by the server and a log record is created. By the way, when these initial keys are stored, what you are doing is starting to create a whitelist of the programs you're going to allow to run on your LPAR. We will talk more about this in a couple of slides. In subsequent scans, the keys are recreated by the agent, sent to the server, and these keys are compared to the ones in the vault. If all is okay, a log record indicating that is produced. We're going to go over what happens if a change is detected later on in the presentation. Now we're going to discuss how this can help you achieve compliance. PCI DSS compliance is important on the mainframe because mainframes are where 87% of credit card transactions are processed. If you look at these statistics, which are from 2018, they show the significance of the mainframe platform to the credit card industry. I don't know what you folks have been doing in your lives since the pandemic began, but I mostly pay everything by credit card. No cash, no debit, just credit. I'm quite interested to see what these statistics will look like in the 2020 pandemic world. In addition, the IT world does seem to be increasingly unsafe. Troy Hunt shows that 1 billion user ID and password combinations are available for sale on the dark web. That's a startling statistic. In addition, hackers have shown their ability to launch multifaceted, team-oriented attacks. They research their targets, they spoil backups prior to their main attack, and they gain access using legitimate credentials. Perimeter security like RACF, Top Secret, and ACF2 thwart people with illegitimate credentials. What do you do if someone has legitimate credentials? I think the fact that legitimate credentials are being used by hackers is borne out by the information contained in the Ponemon reports. The 2019 statistics show that the time to identify a breach is 209 days. We're going to show you how, with our mainframe FIM Plus implementation, we can help you achieve compliance, but we're also going to show how you can harden your security posture and detect issues in hours instead of months. These are the two sections in the PCI DSS which indicated a need for FIM technology. These requirements were put into effect on January 31st, 2018. Version 4 of the PCI DSS is coming out soon, but these requirements will still be in place. The PCI DSS wasn't designed to cause extra work. It was designed to protect cardholder data with reasonable checks, and over the years, it has helped in that respect. Compliance with these sections is evidentiary, so you have to prove that you have been checking the required components on a regular basis. You could do this manually, or you can automate the process using FIM technology. FIM can verify your software levels are correct and provide mountains of evidence to keep any auditor happy. Excellent improvements in a payment card solution's security hardness can be achieved with minimal resource expenditures. Although proven to rapidly identify code alterations on other platforms such as Windows and Linux, true FIM defenses have never been implemented on Z systems. Currently, detecting an intrusion as seen in recent breaches can take an excessive period of time. By using FIM Plus to run scans at regular intervals, FIM Plus can identify altered code or parameters immediately. Once detected, the discrepancy can be reported by sending an alert to a SIEM console, an email to a responsible person, or both. This enables organizations to trigger an appropriate response in a timely fashion and remove the offending component. With FIM Plus, you protect the files that should not change. These include executable files, source files, pretty much anything that resides in a PDS or PDSE. We have support for GDGs and log files, and support for the USS file system. Some of the people we have spoken to on our FIM Plus journey have told us that they view PCI DSS compliance as a bunch of red tape. They tell us that their ZOS security is absolutely top-notch and that they have no need for FIM on the ZOS platform. Obviously, we do not subscribe to that notion. While we hope that that level of hubris does not lead to a breach, we are not confident that it won't. FIM Plus will help you achieve PCI DSS compliance, and that compliance brings the benefit of better security on your ZOS platform. When your executive goes to sign the PCI attestation, wouldn't it be good to know that you've done everything you can to achieve compliance? As we discussed earlier, PCI requires that evidence of compliance is produced, collected, and presented to auditors on request. FIM Plus produces a record for every scan, whether the scan detected changes or if everything was okay. The records are stored in audit logs, and these audit logs can be kept for as long as you like. There is a lot of flexibility built into FIM Plus where audit data is concerned. If you have a SIEM product like Splunk or QRadar, FIM Plus can automatically populate these tools with FIM Plus audit data in XML format. If you do this, you can use the reporting capability built into those products to present the audit data. In addition, FIM Plus has sample standard audit report definitions distributed with the product. The built-in reporting capability includes both charting and the ability to group the data, thus providing roll-up capability. I will show you what the sample report looks like on the next slide. It should be noted that our strategy with FIM Plus is to integrate with other tools in your IT ecosystem. The reports we supply do the basics, but we recognize that you may have requirements that are better suited to other reporting tools. To that end, we've recently added the capability to produce comma-separated value data from our audit logs. This data can be downloaded from the mainframe and loaded into workstation tools like Microsoft Excel. Finally, if you do need to do ad hoc reporting, you can do this through the ISPF interface or the browser interface, or even batch. The ISPF interface has all the function you need, but the browser interface, and I had nothing to do with its development, is really slick and is especially useful for non-mainframers to look at scan results. I apologize for the eye chart here. I wanted to show you the same data two ways. The top part of the slide shows the standard audit report produced by FIM Plus. This is the kind of report you would produce and tuck away and keep for however long you need to keep the audit data in your company. The second component is the same information in the browser interface. From both of these views, you can see the results of the scans from various components that FIM Plus is monitoring. If any modules have been added, changed, or deleted, they will show up here. Further, if any changes are suspicious enough that FIM Plus thinks they are malicious, they will show up here. You may be wondering how a detected change gets malicious status. If someone uses an update and place tool on the mainframe like SuperZap or TSO Test, the contents of the file will be updated, but the metadata will not have changed. That's one way a change can get declared suspiciously malicious. There are a couple more rows of data on the browser interface. They show that a change was detected. If you look at the little blue icon beside the row, you can click on that and it will drill down to the forensic information screen. From that screen, you can see exactly which files have been changed, who made the change, and if it's implemented, whether or not a change request exists for the change. Al will talk more about this in his presentation. I'm going to come back later and talk about banking resilience, but now Al is going to take you through NIST, HIPAA, and FIM compliance. Don't forget that if you have questions, you can type them into the question menu located on the left side of the screen, and we will answer them at the end of the talk. Over to you, Al.
NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, is a US-based agency. It develops standards, guidelines, and best practices to reduce cyber security risks. After more than 20 years of constant revision and over 100 categories of controls, the NIST standards are recognized as effective in providing improved security for IT systems. The framework identifies specific controls that should be implemented on all computer systems. Classic defenses have focused on perimeter security to keep the bad guys out. The NIST framework suggests monitoring both external and internal threats. Most security experts focus on implementing the recommendations to prevent many types of malicious attacks, including ransomware, bots, spyware, Trojans, etc. The acceptance is now so widespread that most countries have reissued the NIST framework under their own name, but recommended substantially the same controls for a secure environment. Although having good perimeter security, mainframes stand out in their poor protection against internal threats. We'll discuss some of the standards that are the most problematic for mainframes as we move forward. Standard procedure in the Linux Windows cloud world is to catalog approved software and applications. An up-to-date inventory at specific release levels down to the individual component is required to ensure no tampering has taken place. Not so for the mainframe. The notion that hackers can steal valid credentials or simply buy them on the dark web seems to be a foreign concept on enterprise systems. Any hacker that gains access is now an insider. If you are focused mainly on perimeter security, the exposure is criminal. That is why NIST recommends integrity checking. Simply put, verify your software by recording a hash code for each component. Then, a quick comparison to this baseline tells you if an insider has compromised anything. The baselines, or in a supplemental note, whitelists, are suggested to take care of unauthorized software. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a good way to do that on mainframes. Proof that you are monitoring for unauthorized software is another issue. Unless systems are continuously monitored, the ability to produce the required evidence is lacking at audit time. But worse yet, if there is an incident, the response can be interminably slow, and recovery even worse. Technology is the answer. Providing clarity on what changed is exactly what is demanded in the NIST recovery processes, and continuous security monitoring is the only way to get it. And having an ironclad audit log is the only way to prove it. Of course, you can do nothing and hope that the audit doesn't turn anything up and no one hacks you. FIM is US legislation from 1996, and it was designed to protect information maintained by federal departments. It resulted in the even more detailed SP 800-53 series of guidelines. The most recent version of these standards, R5, was released September 23, 2020, and contains 483 pages that specifies over 500 controls. FIM is about enforcement of security rules. Every federal department, some state agencies like Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, etc., and companies working for these agencies must comply with all relevant terms based on their security needs. It is the first time that penalties were assessed for non-compliance. Those penalties include censure for violating agencies, as well as loss of funding, loss of staffing, or loss of contracts. Irrespective of whether you are subject to FIM 800-53, it provides valuable insight as to what can be done to protect computer systems of all stripes. In fact, 853 has been adopted and modified by cybersecurity authorities in many countries. For instance, you can refer to the links below to find relevant standard documents. In Canada, ISTG 33, Australia, ISM, UK Cyber Essentials, Germany BIS 100, etc., etc. Security experts the world over point to 853 as an excellent set of controls, and along with ISO 27001, should be implemented on an as-needed basis for all computer systems. HIPAA is another piece of U.S. legislation. It focuses on protecting confidentiality and integrity of electronic health records. HIPAA enforces financial penalties for non-compliance. Although full NIST compliance is not required, a list of breaches on the wall of shame is maintained by the U.S. Department of Health. In the last 30 days alone, well-known names like the Mayo Clinic, Stanford Hospital, U of Michigan have been added to the wall. The largest individual fine under HIPAA in 2020 was $6.5 million applied against Primera Blue Cross on September 25th. HIPAA fines for organizations that expose health records in 2018 amounted to $28.7 million, a fairly substantial number. But even more damaging can be the reputational impact and fallout in the trust relationship for these companies. HIPAA adds a focus on recovery as well as the usual protection and detection. The responsibility to recover quickly is highlighted in the contingency planning area. And quick recovery implies that not only do you have backups that work, there is a critical need for speed. It also means restoring using a manual process is going to take quite a long time. Detecting the problem, identifying the scope, conducting the forensic work, deciding on what to restore can be very time-consuming. The IBM-sponsored Ponemon report estimates that this can take 3 months or more on average to recover full operation after an attack is discovered. That is simply not fast recovery. Audit and integrity controls also suggest real-time alerts and integrity monitoring, such as hash code processing for sensitive files and configurations. To meet the rapid response criteria, it is likely that more will be required. Automation and even policy-driven techniques selected by the client in advance play a key role. A focus on avoiding errors in routine maintenance and auditing deployments to reduce overall outages is important. FIM Plus continuously monitors ZOS system, subsystem components like CICS, DB2, or IMS, and application components. The product looks after executables, JCL and proc labs, configuration parameters, and scripts to make sure that they haven't been altered. Hash codes used for verification of backups and log files can also be created, giving you an early warning of an impending malicious attack. Encrypted files can be monitored without decrypting, and we can also monitor the USS environment and all of its file systems. FIM Plus installs in minutes. During setup, auto discovery runs immediately so that you can get your first comprehensive whitelist in a couple of hours. Since you can run discovery at any time, admin work is minimized, part of our Zero Admin initiative. Offload processing to the crypto card makes this very high performance, low overhead solution. FIM Plus is built for integration mode. It can run wholly on the mainframe or share data with other tools like security consoles or change control systems, running on open systems or in the cloud, or in fact on the mainframe. With existing interfaces to Splunk, QRadar, ServiceNow, Remedy, ChangeMan, SMF, and many other tools, FIM Plus brings the whole security landscape into focus. FIM Plus provides conclusive proof that whole systems are correct. Scans can be initiated on a scheduled basis, on demand by a user, or by a batch job step. It supports new and existing staff with either a GUI or 3270 interface. The real-time email and text alerts go directly to your response team, so any incident gets immediate action. Clicking on the alert puts you right into our interface with the list of affected components and the attack interval already visible. The next click fetches all of the relevant information. One more click gets you the relevant change control info, so you know if it was an approved change or not. FIM Plus Detection runs scans on a scheduled or on-demand basis. The first scan creates a baseline set of component names and hash keys, also called a whitelist, from your trusted system and application components. The keys are stored in an encrypted vault. The vault supports multiple versions of keys corresponding to different levels of software during your rollout process. The correct version can be automatically updated during the deployment of a new release. Subsequent scans generate a new set of up-to-the-minute keys and compares them to the baseline version. If the keys are the same, we say everything is good and write a success record to the FIM log and to your SIM tool. FIM Plus continues to do scanning on a regular basis, decided by the customer. Typically, we find that everything matches and there aren't any problems. However, one day we encounter an unknown change. Then FIM Plus raises a real-time alert and sends it via email or text to members of your response team. When they get the alert, all they have to do is click on the email, and that brings up our 3270 or browser-based interface to guide them through the process. Since FIM Plus scans every component, when the GUI starts up, you already see everything that was affected, so you know the scope of the attack. You also know the interval in which the attack took place. The last success record defines the beginning of the period, and the time of failure marks the end. Once we know the interval, we can simply go to SMF and fetch up to the second access records, but only the ones for the failing components within the attack interval. This can reduce the number of records to be reviewed by an order of magnitude, and that means faster response with the right information and less chance of errors. Now you know who did it and exactly when. Next question, was it approved? Since we know the components affected, a single click will query the change control product to see if there was an approved update. By accessing common tools like BMC's Helix, ITSM, or ServiceNow, perhaps running in the cloud, you can locate any associated change records. If there is one, FIM fetches the reason for the change and displays it immediately. But what if there is no change record? Now we have a problem. For text-based components like config members or PARM settings, FIM Plus can invoke a side-by-side compare program. Now you can compare the baseline copy to the current copy so you can see if it was just a comment line that changed or whether it was something more sinister. Meanwhile, an alert could be escalating through your SIM product like BMC's Command Center, Splunk, or QRadar. Communication between FIM Plus and the SIM tool is bidirectional. That means someone working on the SIM can request services from FIM Plus, like initiating an on-demand scan. Also, status and informational records can be interchanged on the fly. That's real interoperation, leading to a much more comprehensive response from your SIM. More action required? Now you know this is a real malicious attack, so start the recovery. The FIM policy-driven recovery process guides the way. Since you already know the offender, probably the first thing to do is request a suspension of the guilty user ID to prevent further damage. Next step, quarantine the altered components. FIM Plus can place anything affected in a walled-off holding cell, preserving forensic data for later analysis. With fast backup verification, you'll be sure the hacker hasn't compromised your backups too. FIM Plus now invokes the recovery assistant. It already knows the right backups to use and when the affected components were last correct. So it can go out and build the correct restore jobs for you. Then you pull the trigger on restore with a clear conscience, getting back to the desired state in a fraction of the time required to do it manually. And of course, you can run a final verification scan to prove that everything came back correctly. Sound simple? Well, it is. If that wasn't enough, FIM Plus adds real-time early warning and alerts. That's accomplished by scanning SMF access records for suspicious activity. Most hackers now compromise backups before destroying their real targets. This prevents you from recovering after the attack. However, FIM Plus has already verified your backups, so you know you can recover. And just as importantly, this can provide an early warning of an impending malicious attack. Like an alert from any other source, the FIM Plus automated forensics and scanning capabilities can be invoked in stream. So now you're covered on a scheduled basis or in real time. All of your security tools work together to eliminate the gaps that hackers can exploit. The bottom line here is how long does it take you to react? In a classic response, you hope your backups are okay, and you hope all your components haven't been maliciously altered, but you don't know. With FIM Plus, you do know. They either match or they don't. Using automated forensics, you have answers instead of questions right off the bat. Compared with the classic response of getting all the experts together and lots of manual effort, it's like moving at light speed. Some security tools only report suspicious activity. FIM delivers clear, corroborating evidence that can eliminate many false positives raised by these products. By combining information from complementary sources, you can high-grade your alerts, detecting threats that bypass traditional defenses, but also validating the alerts raised are real or not. Now, whether you're a veteran security expert or someone relatively new to mainframes, you can make the right decisions based on rock-solid, validated information. We always like to say, knowledge plus action equals avoidance, not disaster. Well, let's revisit the NIST framework and see what we have done about your ability to comply. Firstly, FIM Plus is about detecting internal threats in cooperation with your existing perimeter security tools. Then it extends those capabilities into forensics and recovery, allowing you to resume normal operation after an attack in a fraction of the time typically required. For a good example of how to handle a malicious attack, you should look at our video on ransomware avoidance. But let's focus now specifically on NIST. It is a 5-phase process: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. FIM Plus has a major impact on 4 of those phases. In fact, we specifically built FIM Plus to fill these kinds of gaps in mainframe security that have persisted for decades. auto discovery, and rapid implementation processes get you started improving your mainframe security in hours, not months. One of the first things you will see is whitelisting. This creates a baseline inventory of software assets so that you can verify all systems running in your environment are approved and every component is at the exact right level. In terms of compliance, that's continuous operation, and it also supplies clear audit recording and reports that prove you are compliant. That's a major advance in its own. But FIM Plus actually extends the framework to two things that are likely to be included in coming years. A good example is checksums on backups. Why? Because you need to know if someone has compromised your most important recovery resource. And furthermore, an integrity check can provide a valuable early warning of an impending attack like ransomware. Get your team on top of the problem immediately with real-time alerts. And our 4-click automated forensics features gets that same response team through the analysis and onto recovery in a snap. Now, with policy-driven recovery tools, your team is guided. Even inexperienced staff can perform the right actions based on the right information to get you back on the air quickly and even be able to verify it is all correct before you have to restart. Of course, this is all about compliance. So our new audit information will help a lot at your next audit. Unlike lots of other solutions that provide ever more reports, FIM Plus provides better compliance by improving the underlying security and then proves that with new information and integration with other tools. Now we're going to talk about GDPR. It is more of an outcome-based compliance process, but it really takes enforcement through mind-boggling financial penalties to a new level. Because it is a legal framework, those fines stick. Article 32 and 43 certainly lay off specific controls for the most part to other compliance groups like PCI, NIST, and ISO. That's probably a good idea because who really wants another set of guidelines to be compliant with? As you have seen, the existing guidelines, if followed, will mitigate your risk. However, the GDPR penalties are significant, up to 4% of total worldwide revenue. So far, Google has set the bar in 2020 in that area, a fine of 50 million euros. They are not alone. Over 220 companies have been fined, and for a total value of exceeding 175 million euros. 45 of them in October alone. You can see the names for yourself: Google, HSM, British Airways. What is really troubling is that estimates are that only 20% of US, UK, and EU companies are really GDPR compliant, and a staggering 30% have not yet started. On that cheery note, I'll just conclude by saying you can look at compliance as just a bunch of red tape, but if you ignore these standards, it is at your peril.
Central banks are starting to provide guidance to member banks on how to improve their cyber resilience. The points listed on the screen are gleaned from the European Central Bank's Cyber Resilience Oversight Expectations document. It can be located at the link on the screen. Central banks in other jurisdictions have similar documents. For instance, the Bank of Canada has published a document titled Cybersecurity Strategy 2019 to 2021, which is based on or identical to the NIST framework. I believe even the colors on the columns in the overview chart are identical to NIST's. The interesting thing about the Bank of Canada strategy is that they indicate they are working with the Canadian government to legislate their guidelines and turn the guidelines into laws, presumably with penalties for non-compliance. In Canada, the 5 major banks are quite powerful, so it remains to be seen how successful the Bank of Canada will be in achieving their legislative goals. I have not researched whether this is occurring in other jurisdictions, but it does underline how serious the central banks are taking the cybersecurity threat. Basically, the central banks are recommending that the banks implement the same things that PCI and NIST are recommending. The European Central Bank goes a little further in indicating that their member banks should add additional security layers to legacy systems. Obviously, we appreciate that sentiment. We have implemented features into FIM Plus as a result of specific bank concerns. For instance, if you are doing DFDSS or FDR backups, the backup files can be very large. We have implemented the capability to do sample scans on these types of files. The idea being that if you create a key from a random sample of the data in the large backup file and save it, if you then recreate the same sample key and the key still matches the original, then the data hasn't changed. We have also implemented a mechanism which isolates change files automatically. If you use the built-in FIM Plus recovery assistant, it ships with the capability to quarantine a file automatically as part of the recovery process. You do not have to use this feature, but it's there if you want it. I believe we've talked about the other capabilities, baselining, whitelisting, automatic incident response, and that kind of thing earlier in the presentation. I just want to wrap up before we answer some questions. A couple of things which we have found is that there is a high degree of convergence between the various security frameworks and standards. Many of them have the NIST framework at their heart. If you comply with any of them, it will result in better security on your mainframe. The need for standards and for better security is driven by sophisticated hackers. Their level of sophistication is not diminishing. I think that one of the factors that is driving the cybersecurity scourge is that it is somewhat difficult for the perpetrators to get caught and punished for their crimes. Even if you identify the perpetrators, if they live in a country that does not have an extradition treaty with your country, there's not much you can do to punish them. When you have an environment where the enforcement options are limited, organizations' best strategy is to step up their defenses. That is the best lever available in this environment. The other factor in play here is the fines being levied as a result of GDPR. While there is a handful of truly jaw-dropping fines being levied, there are a bunch of a more diminutive size. HIPAA is also getting into the fining business and looks like other jurisdictions are at least attempting to head that way. Whether you're trying to avoid fines or trying to improve your security and compliance, our product FIM Plus will drive better compliance and it installs literally in hours. Some of the more advanced features will take a bit more time to implement, but getting started with the basics is a very quick process. It can also significantly speed up the response when an incident occurs. If you want more information or would like to initiate a trial, give us a call or email us on the addresses on the screen. Thanks for listening, and now we'll answer any questions that came in. Over to you, Al.